Hey, it's Tim.
And it's Amy from GoWithLess. We're so glad you're here with us today. In this week's video, we're going to be listing 1 through 10 not so fabulous parts of our first 14 months as nomads. We got a long list. I hope you'll stay tuned for the whole thing.
Every Wednesday here on our channel, we come out with a new video, typically talking about our early retirement or our nomadic lifestyle. In 2015, we left our careers in our late 40s, and in January of 2020, we sold our home and became full-time nomads.
We hope that you will subscribe over here. Even though the video topic isn't so sunny, we still hope you'll give us a thumbs up. And I want to say that Tim and I really debated even doing this topic. Can we do anything complainy at all, given that our life is really terrific? We have a lot of realization that sounds kind of like we don't want to be jerks. And
on the flip side, also, I think there's this perception that a lot of people who talk about their lives on the internet have this Instagram-y life where everything is perfect, every picture is perfect, and they have a perfect life. Our life is far from perfect, and these are just 10 things that we've picked out that sort of highlight how imperfect our life is. I think at the end of this also you'll get a little spin on, I think there's some positive takeaways even from the awfulness that we did experience in the past 14 months.
And if you didn't see it, and almost nobody saw it because this video was put out during the US inauguration in January, we did a whole video dedicated to the silver linings because of all this nastiness. My parents said it was their favorite video we have done in 3 years. So hopefully I'm going to put that at the end. If you haven't seen that, make sure to see it. And we've done several videos about our intense and immense gratitude. So we have definitely tried to do the positive side, but again, for good reason. I think we're going to share go through the muck here, and we're going to do it in order. So we're going to start with our trip started, our nomadic life started in January of 2020. The bad stuff started in January of 2020, right away.
Immediately. So right after we sold our home, we drove down to Texas and subsequently wound up in Louisiana, where we hopped on a cruise. The first day I got on the cruise, I had a sore throat, so something was going on.
And a sniffle.
And a sniffle. And turns out I was sick for going on about a month. In the middle of this, I gave something to Amy. I think it transformed into something else for her because she was a lot sicker than I was. And we were bad off for 6 weeks.
I was for 6 weeks. Tim didn't have it as bad. Yep. I was at the urgent care 3 separate times. I was on antibiotics. I was on Theraflu. So it was bad. Really bad. And during that, we had a few house sits cancel, and on camera, roughly at the very last few days of February, I think, Tim says, I don't think it can get much worse from here. Now, what you'll see is, since we're in sequence, that we have number 2 through 10 on our list got worse from Tim saying that. So one lesson is, don't ever say that. It can always get worse. We all know this, but Tim said it out loud, and I knew we were in big trouble after that.
I cursed us.
You totally did.
Our life is still amazing, but nonetheless, so we had plenty of bad after number 1. So the second thing that happened to us, after we were finally getting over feeling better, we were in Arizona at the time, where finally things are getting good. We're flying to Louisiana, where our car is stored, and we're going to be reunited with our car, and our journey is going to continue. The minute we show up in Louisiana is the minute that COVID gets becoming awful here in the United States. I think it's like the day or 2 days after we land in Louisiana, the state goes on lockdown mode. It's what do they call it? Shelter in place. So as soon as we got there, it's like you're not supposed to leave.
Restaurants are closed, bars are everything closed.
The grocery store, there's no toilet paper in the grocery stores. It's everything that everybody started to experience with COVID was happening in Louisiana, and consistently we would hear on the news that New Orleans is the hot spot in the United States when it comes to COVID.
In the world.
In the world.
The world.
So we're in the worst place in the world where COVID is happening at the moment. Luckily, we were able to avoid getting COVID ourselves, and we think. And so, but nonetheless, all this mess was happening right after I said things can't get much worse.
Okay, then kind of number 3, but piggybacking on that, is we get a flat tire. As Louisiana, New Orleans goes down on lockdown, we have a flat tire, and we realize that we're going to be in our home for 6 to 7 weeks, I think it was. We were only supposed to be there for 2 weeks, and we were going to be out playing all the time in New Orleans. Well, it turns out that our hostess, it's her second home, and she lives in Denver, she doesn't have internet there because she's never home. When she's in New Orleans, she is out having a great time, which is what people do in New Orleans. So could you imagine not having any internet at the beginning of COVID? No, neither could we.
Yeah, so not only, so the flat tire, no big deal. Same thing with no internet normally. So the thing with the flat tire, it took me, I had to go to 4 different stores in the middle of this COVID situation to try and deal with getting my tire fixed. And for a variety of reasons, it wasn't just a normal flat repair. And so it took me a lot of effort to figure this out. I think it was over the course of 2 days, and it took forever to sort of make that happen. So in and of itself, not a big deal, but in the context of COVID, it was awful.
This is like the first week of COVID.
And same thing with the internet. I had to go, and you just can't go get internet turned on at the local cable company or at the local phone company for a month. That's just not the way they work.
And it wasn't wired for cable.
So, right. There were also issues with the cabling inside of the home that I had to fix while I was there. I had to go and buy a tool to actually get the cable so that it would support the cable modem that we ultimately wound up with. And as it turned out, because of COVID, Cox Cable in Louisiana was doing something special that worked out perfect for us. But nonetheless, it was a lot of heartache associated with just getting these services sort of going and our life moving along. Just these 2 things were no good.
No good. Number 4, we end up at a house sit in Tennessee on the farm, and there was some severe weather, like just big thunderstorms at the very beginning. So we had kind of a shorty ladder, and a limb came down during one of the storms.
Yeah, so I thought I would go out and take care of this limb, just do the right thing, take this ladder out, climb up on the ladder and saw off the limb, finish sawing off the limb. Well, I didn't do everything you're supposed to do with a ladder, and I did none of it right. I ended up falling off the ladder, and I'm pretty sure I broke a rib. I was in pain for about 6 weeks. It was minor pain, but nonetheless, I had to deal with it for 6 weeks. I think it took all of 6 weeks to get better, and the reason I think I broke it is this is what I had read, is it takes about 6 weeks to heal. That lines up with how long it took for me to feel better, and at the end of the day, anyway, I had to suffer for 6 weeks after falling off of a ladder.
While being on a farm, which requires a lot of physical involvement.
Exertion, yeah.
A lot of physical stuff happening on a farm. Okay, we make our way across the country to the Pacific Northwest. We're north of Seattle, about an hour north of Seattle, and maybe after a month in or so, the fires and smoke from Oregon, California just go absolutely crazy. So much so that we are forced to be inside. So the only thing you can really do during COVID is to be outside. Well, we are now forced to be inside because of the extremely high unhealthy air quality index, which is in the high 300s, which is as bad as pollution gets in any of the worst cities in the world. So stuck inside, very fearful about this smoke situation and just the people losing their homes, and just so sad.
We don't watch a lot of local news, and so we weren't actually sure what was going on when this first started going down. So we were reading on the internet about California and Oregon, and things were on fire there, and the skies were orange. We had none of that. It just was, we had lots of smoke. And so one morning we woke up, I thought somebody in the neighborhood had like burned their trash or something. It smelled awful. And
like chemicals.
As it turned out, like chemicals, and as it turned out, it was just the smoke blowing up from California and Oregon fires.
Yeah.
And it was a disaster. So that part of the country really had a tough go of it for about, 2 or 3 weeks. It was bad. So we were stuck in the middle of that, and
I wouldn't say we were in the middle, but we were involved.
On the periphery of that.
In the middle would be fires.
That's true. That impacted us in a way that was not desirable.
Okay, we are on number 6. We had spent some time in Southern California. We left to go to Mexico, and we were coming back for another, just a short house sit, maybe about a week. Now, the couple that we were house sitting for, they had a spring wedding in Mexico. That was postponed because of COVID to the first week of, or the beginning of December. Well, California then went into another big lockdown, like lockdown number 2. And so here we are in Mexico. We see this. We say this couple is going to be, first of all, we knew they were going to cancel their wedding in Mexico because no one was going to be going. And then we said, like, they're going to stay home. Who's taking a vacation in California during the middle of a lockdown? Thankfully, they did. But we knew that at any moment that could cancel at the last second. So Tim had to figure out what count. And so
our biggest concern was actually that we weren't going to be able to find a hotel room in California, because we were like within 2 days of California saying all the hotels, unless you're an essential worker, you can't stay at a hotel in California. And so we were concerned that we weren't going to have a place to stay when we showed up there before our house had started. This was a concern for us back in New Orleans as well, right whenever COVID started. So this has been a concern sort of us for many months. But anyway, in California, it was bad again, and they were saying you weren't going to be able to stay someplace. As it turned out, the hotel where we had chosen to stay let us stay there, so it was okay.
But Tim had to suss out where could we stay that was going to let us in. And after a really long day driving from... Those are ducks. So do you see the creek behind us? And did you see our squirrel video? What the heck is it with us and the wildlife? Anyway, okay, so it's been quiet. Okay, so where were we?
In California.
Okay, in California. So we were worried that we were going to have this long day drive from Mexico and be turned away at our final destination in California. So Tim went ahead and found what county is the closest county we can get to that doesn't have this hotel problem. So fortunately we didn't need it, but we had done the due diligence. It would have made for one heck of a long day. Number 7 comes in at the very end of 2020. Here we are, ready to turn the page to 2021, but not before we add another entry to our list.
And this one was another one that impacted me predominantly in that I made a trip to the hospital. And Amy's going to put a video right up here that talks a little bit more about exactly what happened with that. But at the end of it all, I had diverticulitis and I had to take 2 trips to the hospital to figure out what was going on. It was a complete disaster and a horrible way to wrap up a pretty bad year for us in terms of just a series of bad... I'm not going to say that it was a bad year for us because our year was actually phenomenal. It was just a series of weird things happened, and so this was not a good way to wrap up this crazy 2020.
Okay, and then we get into 2021. We have a house sit in Central Texas, in Georgetown, Texas. And Tim has promised me as a Texan, as a former Texan, that it's great. Texans. I'm currently a Texan, but you lived along all of your life in Texas until the past 20 years. So Tim has kind of promised me that Texas has really mild, easy winters. And we had the kind of the biggest snowstorm they had in January, which was only 3 inches. But when you don't have any tools to deal with the snow, 3 inches is kind of a lot.
So we were in
it just makes ice.
In Georgetown, Texas. So this was record-setting snow. So it had been about 10 years since they had this amount of snow in Georgetown. And again, 2 to 3 inches of snow. People in Texas Texas isn't outfitted to deal with this kind of weather because it happens so infrequently, and so it was bad. So we had to walk the dog in the middle of this weather, and it was the
15-year-old dog.
I mean, is it 3 or 4 days worth of miserable weather?
At least 3, yeah.
Yeah, so it was yucky.
Plenty, too many, more than 0. Anything more than 0 is too many. And then it turns out that was like kids' play compared to what came in number 9. So I'm sure that you are aware of what happened in Texas. We did a whole video about it last week. Well, here we are on Monday. Last week on Monday, we had just mentioned that we lost our water. Well, our water didn't come on for another 120 hours. Our home was without hot water for 120 hours. And even though we had stocked the home full with ingredients because we planned to do all of our cooking at home, we didn't anticipate the power going out. So what are we going to do with raw pork when the power's out and we need to wash our hands and we have no water? So it turns out that we needed to figure out something to do with like peanut butter and jelly and ham and cheese sandwiches and canned soup and things like that. Things that we really don't eat much. So it wasn't good eats for sure that week. But on that Monday when we lost our water, later that night, I called the next door hotel and I asked, do you have power and water? Because I had seen power outages from friends and people on Facebook. And so they said, yes, we do have power and water. However, we are sold out tonight and we've been sold out for the past 3 nights. Here's what you need to do if you're interested, is you need to book now for tomorrow because everyone just wakes up in the morning and figures out what they're going to do later that day and schedules a night at the hotel that night. And by then it's all filled up. So we went ahead and we booked, we had 3 nights at the hotel. Thankfully, the hotel had these rolling power outages, like a 30 minutes out, 60 minutes on throughout for like 3 days, I guess. But we never knew. So many friends had like 48 plus hours of no power. We never knew if the power would come back on. So just like, even though the power outages were expected on these rolling power outages, we didn't know that it was guaranteed that it was ever coming back on for days and days and days.
Yeah, and we assumed that we were going to end up back in our other place after our home after we were done with the hotel situation, and so we weren't sure if the water was going to immediately be back on. So all the water had been turned off in our building. We knew that there were broken pipes in our particular unit. There weren't any. However, there were other places in the complex, in our building specifically, that had broken pipes that were going to have to be fixed. So we thought the water may be off for a week or 2. We're hearing that plumbers are still working on issues from the storm, and it's big 70 degrees and nice right now.
Yeah.
So we thought that with that, having that knowledge, we would try and get the bathtub filled up with some water, so at least if we're back there and out of the hotel, we could flush the toilet. So I would go down to the spigot outside and fill up a cooler that we have. We live on the 3rd floor, and I'd bring water
No
up.
elevator.
No elevator. So I brought up about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 loads of water from outside that are very heavy, probably 10 gallons of water I would bring up, dump in our tub, and I did this several times. And it was a lot of work. As a matter of fact, my back is now hurting from bringing all this water up and down the stairs. And so, again, no good deed.
Poor guy. It was rough. It was really rough. And thankfully on Saturday, the weather thawed. We did get our water back on Saturday around noon, 120 hours later. And other than our washing machine, which we're still not allowed to use it because they're still fixing other issues, it otherwise seems like things are good. And here we are. You'll see us. We're outside. We're at the creek. It's 70 degrees and sunny and breezy. It's just perfect. And we're back in our sweet spot. But it was 10 dismal days, barely outside. Bad, 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 bad.
Yep.
Okay. And that leads us to number 10. Our final entry isn't a specific incident. It is 18 incidents, as a matter of fact. And it is 18 canceled house sits. Now, if you have ever planned one house sit, you may know how much work goes into planning a house sit. We had that times 18. So you have a Skype call, you have personal application letters, you have all kinds of people who didn't respond to your request. So to have 18 house sits go up in smoke is really, that's a killer.
Yeah, so hundreds of hours Amy put into putting these together. So there's a lot of upfront work, and then once you're on it, anyway, it's a ton of effort is the primary thing that we lost, as well as this was going to be a roof over our head for these multiple weeks worth of house sitting. And
multiple weeks, almost the whole year.
Almost the whole year. So we had over 200 nights booked at the beginning of the year, and I think most of that fell apart. So 200 nights we had to recover from and figure out a plan B or a plan C or a plan D or wherever we are now. But nonetheless, it was awful.
Nonetheless is your word today, this week.
Okay,
yeah, so this week is nonetheless.
Ding, ding. Nonetheless.
Okay, Tim has like a word he captures, and today it's nonetheless.
Yes.
So, okay, but what was interesting is the number 18 house that they canceled, she is nearby in Texas, and I've been in touch with her. She did lose power for quite some time, for over 48 hours, no power. And as bad as that is, and it was awful for so many people, we don't have any gear for this. So we don't have sleeping bags, we don't have lots of layers of coats and socks, and we don't have all that. We're nomads. Not only that, we're not supposed to be in cold weather. So that would have made it, like, if we had lost heat, it would have been really bad. And there wasn't an enormous amount of snow here. I don't know if I haven't really heard that. It was really the extreme cold temperatures. The ice was never able to melt on the streets because it never got below freezing for almost, like, for over a week. It didn't get below freezing. So that meant that it never got to melt. It was just always treacherous road conditions, even though there wasn't massive snow like I'm used to from Northeast and Colorado. It was still bad. So we're happy it's over.
I think somebody or some people might suggest that the universe is screaming at us to do something different. Like, obviously these things that happened to you throughout this year mean that you are not doing the right things in your life. And we have taken away the exact opposite. So all of these things that have happened throughout the year just speak to the fact that we don't know that we're guaranteed tomorrow. We want to be living our best life every day, and the fact that these things could happen, most of these things could have happened back at our home in Colorado. So being on the road is just something we still don't feel like we've really launched into our ultimate journey until we can get on the road and get out of the U.S., even though we made the best of last year. And I'm going to say that we had a fantastic 2020, even given all this crazy stuff that happened.
There were good parts.
There were good parts, and so once we can actually launch our real life, then we'll see again how things go from there. But we're more excited than ever about our nomadic lifestyle and the choices that we've made. And so even though all these things sort of impacted us, I think also having some perspective on the fact that in the scope of things, we didn't lose any loved ones this last year. So there's so many great things that we have going on in our life. It makes it easy for us to really look beyond this awful stuff and just focus on the things that we have that are really incredible in our life.
Now, if you didn't see the Silver Linings video, I'm going to attach it at the end of this video. And the question that we have of our audience today is, what would you have done with this list of 10 things? Would you maybe crawl under your bed and not come out for 10 years? Would you go the opposite direction? So again, Tim has said, like, we're chomping at the bit to be living our best life, and our best life isn't necessarily in the United States. It's really getting around the world and seeing all kinds of cool stuff, and we're dying to get out and do that. So we want to know, what would that mean to you? Would you hide, or would you want to go live life more fully than ever?
Would you be emboldened or discouraged?
Down below. We're going to see you
Adios.
next Wednesday. Thanks for watching.